finish our study of levels of learning, which is from ST 40.4. And this topic is useful in helping us to understand how Dhamma teachings are given and how they should be understood. It also gives us some idea on how the suttas are taught, compiled, and transmitted, and also how the sutta should be understood. In short, this essay is about how we should look at Buddhism. Okay? Now, when we look at the Book of Tools, the Dukkha Nipata, we have the Buddha there saying that whenever you look at the suttas, and it also includes listening to a Dhamma teaching, we should ask ourselves whether at that moment or maybe in retrospect, looking back, on what level is the teaching, or what level is the teacher talking. And this is in fact a very important key to understanding the nature of not only Buddhism but religion itself. And if we don't understand this twin aspect of a teaching, we're going to have a wrong idea about religion. And there's going to be a lot of difficulties in this. We won't progress. In a sense, you might say, you're stuck with religion if you don't see the difference. But if you free yourself from religion, then you go on to what's called spirituality. Spirituality, of course, means the spirit, the meaning, purpose and meaning of the teaching. So here in the Book of Tools, the Buddha says that we should distinguish between the teaching whose meaning has been drawn out, in other words, explicit or direct teaching, and the teaching whose meaning need to be drawn out, in other words, implicit teaching. You've got to kind of tease out the meaning. What does it mean? To ask yourself. So this is a basic idea behind understanding religion, and the Buddha's teaching especially. Now, of course, not everyone is able to at once see this difference. Right? Not many people even listen to the suttas to understand this kind of teaching. The reason for this is because there are different kinds of personality traits. And in the context of our study today, we can say that two main types of character traits. Or in the suttas, they're called indriyas, or what are called spiritual faculty. The spiritual faculty is what, in a sense, what empowers us to practice the Dharma, to attain certain levels of understanding. So two are very important here, that is faith and wisdom. In other words, if you go to any gathering where people discuss the Dharma or where there are talks, you can easily or maybe with some effort discover these two kinds of people, the faith inclined and the wisdom inclined. The faith inclined, of course, are those who come to listen to the Buddhist talk because it's a Buddhist talk. So where they'll say, well, I'm a Buddhist, so I want to listen to a Buddhist talk. It doesn't matter what kind of talk, just as long as Buddhism, I want to hear it. There are no more about Buddhism. And maybe they might even just believe whatever they hear. That's the faith inclined. The wisdom inclined is the one who is more investigative. You might go to different talks and say, okay, let me find out more about this religion. You might not just listen to Buddhism, you might even shop around and listen to all kinds of talks, and even read science books and so on. So you have these two kinds of personalities. It's not that one is good or bad. It's, in a sense, people don't have a choice whether they are faith inclined or wisdom inclined. It is the nature of the person, maybe upbringing, maybe background. Basically, it's a psychological trait. So in the Buddha's teaching, these two kinds of people are always given due consideration, in other words. No? For example, those of faith inclined also tend to see Buddhism on very simple level, so they need simple level of teaching, stories, imageries, things like that. On the other hand, those who are wisdom inclined, they prefer deeper analysis, comparisons with various teachings, and so on. As to the question who will progress faster, whether the faith inclined or the wisdom inclined, is hard to say. For example, if someone with faith listens to instructions properly and the teacher is a wise and compassionate teacher, then you find the one who is faith inclined is likely to progress faster. On the other hand, the wisdom inclined might be full of doubts and questions and never really practice. In other words, there's this endless search, endless quest, but never really tasting the result of fruit. So the wisdom inclined may not progress so fast in that way. On the other hand, the wisdom inclined may go to question the teaching, and you definitely get better answers, things become clearer, and the person can say meditate better. So these are possibilities which can arise. A very useful habit is to ask ourselves, what sort of character trait do I have? Right? Am I faith inclined or am I wisdom inclined? Well, sometimes we won't know, but sometimes we can know. Of course, again, this kind of situation is not so clear-cut. Right? For example, in some cases we could be faith inclined, we could believe someone saying something. In some cases we could be more wisdom inclined, where we will ask questions and kind of analyze the answer more carefully, and examine the answer, reflect on the answer more carefully. So in a sense, we have to examine ourselves, and it's good to be aware of both aspects. Faith is a very important aspect of Buddhism. It's often neglected, partly because of the influence of other religions, especially the God religions. It's not the fault of the God religions that the Buddhists are like that. The problem is the Buddhists, number one, do not study the suttas well enough. They're not well grounded in the Dharma. They take Buddhism more just like a hobby. So there's no one who really knows enough, and only know enough, but it's transformed and changed by the Dharma. Right? So these are two aspects we must always remember. It's not just how much we know about the Dharma. Often we go for a talk, we say, oh, this person knows a lot. But that doesn't say much, except in terms of status, perhaps. On the other hand, if you say, after this Dharma talk, I feel very happy. That's a nice, wonderful thing to hear. It's not because of the person, but it's because of the Dharma. So this is where we can say that the teaching then is Dharma-based, not teacher-based, right? There are, of course, cases, and perhaps it's even more common today than before. People tend to be more excited by the teacher they're listening to. So they are person worship person. So this is a person-based situation. No matter what the person said, they'll laugh, they'll be happy. But beyond that, they're not happy. So this is a person-dependent kind of situation, which is not very healthy. On the other hand, someone who listens to the Dharma and feels happy, he remembers the Dharma, you can take home the Dharma, you can't take home the teacher, though some may try. So this is where you can bring home the Dharma, and you practice and you continue to be happy. That's the big difference. So a Dharma-based teaching is more useful, in other words. And here is where the Buddha reminds us to not to fall into this what we call charismatic approach to people. So there are, for example, there are those who judge a speaker by their looks. For example, they look old, they wear robes which look different, very ragged and patches and dirty maybe. Or on the other hand, they may wear a very nice, lounge suit maybe, or some kind of impressive way of dress. Or they are good looking. It is another very important aspect. I've heard people who come to talk say, you must come to listen to this monk. He's very good looking, right? Or this monk is very knowledgeable. He's got all kinds of titles, like religious titles or academic titles. In fact, there is a story of a certain monk called Lakuntaka Badia, the dwarf. It's very short, so it's not very good looking. But he has this really beautiful voice, like the voice of those radio announcers, but it doesn't have the look of a TV announcer, TV speaker, unfortunately. So when people look at him, they won't even look a second time. But the moment he speaks, people say, wow, whose voice is that? They're drawn to him. Right? But he's an arhat. So he says, those of you who are drawn to me by my voice are only judging me externally. It's very foolish. No? And those of you who judge me by my looks are also foolish. So in other words, he's saying you should be listening to the Dharma instead of judging this person. So this is one of those, you might say, the very first difficulty we face in religion. We tend to go by looks. We tend to go by knowledge. Right? We tend to go by the five senses. I remember when we were very young, in Malacca, my friends and I loved to go to one particular nunnery because the food was good there. Vegetarian food was well cooked. So that's one of the senses, cooked. And sometimes we like to go to another gathering because the singing is good and so on. So if we judge a religion by the five senses, then we are stuck with the world because the five senses are the world. The sixth sense, the mind, is what we need to cultivate, right? So we have to use our minds more. So in other words, if you go to a Dharma talk or you meet a teacher and you discuss and you listen, and your mind gets stimulated and you begin to think, you get answers. I remember when I was very young, 40 years ago, 50 years ago even, when I was say 15 to 18 around that time, when I was very new to Buddhism, we're talking about the time before computers, before books, really good books on Buddhism, dictionaries of Buddhism were non-existent, things like that. I remember whenever I meet an English-speaking man, I'll be so happy. I'm trying to ask him all kinds of questions. And whatever he says, I'll be really excited. I'll be noting it down and so on. It never occurred to me I could use a tape recorder because, well, as I said, those days, it was like 40 years ago. So I'll take down notes and I'll say, excuse me, is it okay if I take down some notes and things like that. So, and then when I saw books, Buddhist books, it was really amazing. I said, wow, this is wonderful. As I say, you could get enlightened right away just, having those books. Of course, things have changed a lot now. There's spot for choice of so many books, so many websites, and so many teachers. So this is where choosing the right approach is very important when you come to really to practice correctly for the benefit of spiritual growth. So whether we are faith inclined or wisdom inclined, follow the path and ask yourself, am I happy with this? What's happening to me? Because becoming a Buddhist is not about knowing Buddhism. It's about self-transformation. What does this knowing do to me? Does it make me happier? Does it make me more peaceful? Does it make me more compassionate to others? Does it make me able to communicate better with others? A simple way of remembering Buddhism is to be able to make as many people happy as possible. Right, in George Eliot's famous novel called Middlemarch, there's one very special character. She suffers a lot throughout the story, but she never gave up on that point. It's really very inspiring and inspired person. And when she was, during one of our conversations, she said someone asks us something like a purpose in life, I just said my purpose in life is to make as many people happy as possible. And I think that neatly summarizes what being a Buddhist is about, to make as many people happy as possible. In a sense, the word Bhagavan means just that, someone who makes other people happy. When we say Sukhi Hotu, Sukhi means be happy, may you be happy. So, you've got to be happy first. Right? And we get happy by calming our minds, by doing loving kindness, then we show that happiness to others. The act of showing happiness also a practice where you become happy. Now, if you have that happiness, it doesn't really matter how deeply you know the Dharma or not, because somehow you will understand how to practice it in other ways. When you listen to the Dharma, you feel peaceful. You may not understand the words at first, but towards the end, you know how to fit things together. In other words, right? So there's a big difference between knowing and feeling, or knowing and being happy, in other words. So, where does wisdom come in here, you might say? Knowledge is, in a sense, a measurable kind of thing. We know so much, so to speak, right? Or we know so many suttas, or we know a lot, we say, right? Wisdom, on the other hand, is a momentary thing. You can say, of course, somebody is very wise, but it is more likely to be a momentary thing. In other words, wisdom is the ability to know what to do at that moment in time. In other words, you have presence of mind, and you respond in an effective way, in a healing and helping way. In a helping and healing way. That's wisdom. Wisdom is the proper application of knowledge and information. That's another way of putting it. So, another way of looking at the nature of wisdom is understanding what a person means when he talks. So this is where we come to, again, listening to the Buddha's teaching, we have what I call the two levels of truth or meaning. You have what's called the worldly level, and you have the spiritual level, or absolute level, or ultimate level, if you like. For example, the Buddha will tell stories about animals and so on, a kind monk, a clever monkey, or a kind man, and it gets rewarded, right? So we know that kind of story is on a worldly level. Then, in certain suttas, for example, the Singapore Sutta, the Jhana Sutta, the Buddha teaches us, say, okay, this is how you can be happy, right? Number one, you have a job, so you're happy you have a job. Number two, you benefit from the job, you get paid, you have money, you have wealth, you're very happy, and you can use that money. And number three, you are free from debt. These are the three kinds of happinesses. These are, of course, worldly teachings. But number four, the Buddha says, you should also be accomplishing wisdom. Right? And then the Buddha defines what is wisdom. He said, well, wisdom is watching the rise and fall of things. In other words, watching impermanence. Right? You may have money, you have the job, you have money, you are debt-free, and you use your wealth to buy the things that you need, and you enjoy a happy family life. But then somehow things do not seem right all the time. Right? So why? Because we do not understand or accept impermanence. So if we understand the nature of impermanence, then we are wise to an extent. So this last teaching is said to be Dharma aspect. It's non-worldly. Because why? It brings you out of the world. It brings you out of suffering, in other words. So, whenever we look at Buddhist teachings, we also have to ask ourselves, is this worldly teaching? Worldly teaching, it keeps us in the world? Or is it Dharma teaching, spiritual teaching, ultimate teaching? It brings us out of the world. What does out of the world mean? Does it mean you don't, the normal part of this world, that this world is bad, evil? Well, it's not like that. The world is such that it's neutral, in other words. The world out there is just the way it is. It's how we think about it that makes the world good or bad, suffering or not. So to be caught up in the world means we are ruled by our five senses. We are controlled by what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Okay? We are worried about our senses, we are worried about our looks, we are worried about things of the world. The five senses are the world. To get out of the world means you are willing and able to let go of the senses. And this is what we do in meditation, right? When we sit calmly, we close our eyes, we try not to move in a comfortable way, we let go of sounds, we don't care about smells, all our five senses calm down. So that we can forget about the five senses and look directly into the mind. Why do we need to do this? Because it's the mind that looks at all these five senses and makes up things. It's the mind that creates our world. So if we understand the mind, then we also understand our world, we take charge of our lives, and we'll be more happy afterwards. So a Dharma-based life, spiritual training, goes directly into the mind, looking directly into where the source of the problems are in us. Understand the nature of the mind. Right? In that sense, Buddhism is very mind-centered. So the Dharma, in other words, points directly to the mind. And if the Dharma points directly to the mind, it's going to be very helpful to us. It makes us understand ourselves. But if the Dharma points something outside, here Dharma means a personal teaching by people or group, right? It points out to other things. For example, the person will tell you, oh, you chant this mantra, you chant this Buddha's name so many times, your problems will be solved. Or better still, all the terrible karma you have done, even killing parents and so on, are all absolved. You are purified of karma. There's no such teaching anywhere in the suttas. Because these are external things. Once you externalize this kind of practice, then it's become like a God religion. It becomes not Dharma. Because the Buddha's teaching is you look within yourself. Understand within yourself means understand your mind. That's where the problems are. So to let go here means letting go of the five senses. Letting go of the five senses doesn't mean you stop functioning with the five senses. It means you've got to let them come, let them go. Just as your breath comes in, you've got to let go of your breath in order to live. Even when you see things, visions come to you, visions go. And that's the way things are. You've got to let it be that way. Then only you will learn. Learning means allowing all this flow of sense data to move on. You cannot stop it. You cannot clog it. You can take photographs of it, yes, but it's just a moment in time. You've got to see the whole picture, so to speak. Right? So the mind is able to see the whole picture if it wants to, in that sense. And the whole picture, of course, is nirvana. Nirvana, everything is there, so to speak. And yet you don't need any of those things. So, when we look at things, it's not just looking. We can say we react, we respond to how we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, all in different ways. And how we respond or react to these sense impressions depends a lot on our views. So in many ways we can say all these five senses create views in us. We see something, we have a view, and of course it's obvious, right? We call it a view, is a way of seeing things. We hear something, we have a view also. We smell something, we have a view about it, and so on. So view here means what? I like something, I don't like something, I don't care about it. Right? A view is a way we create things. A view means we make it countable, we make it measurable. But the reality is none of these experiences can be measured. So views, in other words, are all temporary, provisional. They may help us to connect with the moment, but that's it. The moment passes away, then we've got to try again, be aware again, like that. Okay? So views simply help us in the moment, and you have to let go of the views also in order to grow, to change. So change, in other words, is the real thing that's happening. If you accept change, then you will grow. If you simply accept change, then you're someone with faith. But if you ask, what's going on in this change? Why must I change? Then you cultivate wisdom. Right? Either way, you reflect on change, you will grow. Because growth is change. Change is the rule of life. Understanding change is what brings us wisdom. And wisdom is what liberates us from suffering. So, of course, all this I've said so far, we can say are still theoretical, because that's what I can do at the moment, telling you something that I know, something based on the suttas, but hopefully. So this is the first level of understanding, first level of wisdom, if you like. So then this is the level of listening. Of course, in some texts, this level is put number 2, but it doesn't really matter. The first level, first way we learn something, or the most common way we learn about things is through listening. I mean, just spend a moment as we sit here, trying to examine all the things that we know right now, all the things that we know. Try to remove, let's say we remove all the things that we know, say from watching the TV. Remove that. Remove what you know through reading the newspapers. Remove that. Whatever you know through gossip, listening to other people. Remove that. Through the mass media, through the computers and so on. We don't want that. In other words, we ask ourselves, how much do I really know through my own understanding? I mean, an interesting thing is, I'm sure we found that we have nothing much, we have very little, right? Now, this is the wonderful thing about studying the suttas, When we do sutta translation, you study sutta, even you teach sutta, you find after a while, something comes out. Oh yeah, why didn't I think of this before? And this is something that comes to you in your own mind. That's really your understanding. So this is the second level of wisdom or understanding, level of thinking. Right? First level of listening, second level of thinking. In other words, you think about it, it comes to you. Right? Sometimes we call this process as, we describe it as being creative. Creative because it comes to you. Right? I've written a new story, right? In a series which I call the Singapore Fables, where I will use some old familiar stories that you already know about, and I will kind of rehash it and then tell it in a new way with some deeper meanings, going to Buddhist teaching, a bit of humor and so on. So it just comes to me like that. I said, oh, this is a beautiful story, I must write it down so that people can laugh at it and then learn, laugh and learn. So if you allow yourself to be peaceful, calm and joyful, these wonderful ideas, creative ideas, new ideas will come. This is level of thinking. Right? So here we are listening to the Dharma. How do we get this level of thinking? When you go back, moments of silence, after the stop, you reflect on these teachings. What did I learn today? What did the Buddha say? What does the Sutta say? You reflect in that way. You just reflect. Don't expect anything. Just do it. And you'll find this habit is a learning process. This is the way to wisdom. Things will somehow fit together. Of course, asking questions is a great thing. In fact, nowadays, all you have to do is just go on asking, and you find you will get the answers sooner or later. It's much easier to get your questions answered today than it was in my time. And one of the things I really enjoy doing is when people ask Dharma questions, serious, good Dharma questions, they really want to know, I'm most happy to help, because in doing so, you actually preserve the true teaching. So, second level of wisdom, thinking, right? Sometimes we call this academic knowledge because we learn it from others. We go to school, we go to universities. I remember one of the first times that I attended a university talk, I was really enthralled. I was so excited because here you are, this person who knows so much is telling me how to think freely, how to express yourself effectively, how to defend your ideas, how to listen to other people's ideas, and so on and so forth. But it's still second-hand knowledge, because we're listening to other people. But it's better than third-hand knowledge, right? Instead of just listening, you're thinking about it, right? To that extent, it is useful. So there is actually academic knowledge can also be said to be listening. Okay, depends. Yeah? If you think, of course, you can also call it academic knowledge. But a bit, if you want to get your terms more accurate, technical, you can say listening is academic knowledge, purely academic, right? Because you listen to the lecturer. Whereas thinking, you think for yourself, is philosophical knowledge. Philosophical knowledge, because what philosophy I love to think, right? So if you think about it, philosophers love thinking. So these two are the most common kind of knowledge we have in the world. And too much of either can get us into a lot of trouble. Listening too much to too many teachers, we get confused. One teacher said this, another teacher said that. Because when you go for Dharma talks, especially today, it's not really about the Dharma, you know. What you already hear is this teacher is telling you how much I know, and what I know is better than the next teacher, and so on. For example, recently, one quite concerned student came to me and asked me a question. He said, one of the speakers I heard said that laymen should not meditate. It's the job of the monks to meditate. It's dangerous for lay people to meditate. So this lay person has been meditating, so he was a little confused. And he says, and this speaker, he is so knowledgeable. I said, what do you mean? Oh, he knows Abhidharma. Okay. So I said, all right. I said, first thing is, just because someone talks about Abhidharma doesn't mean the person knows Abhidharma. A person may know a lot of Abhidharma, but he doesn't know the Dharma. He may know a lot of Abhidharma, he doesn't know the suttas. Because, for example, if an Abhidharma speaker were to say, laymen should not meditate, only monks meditate, then I say, how would this teacher interpret the teaching of the three trainings? Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the Eightfold Path. Right, the Eightfold Path comprises Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila, moral virtue, you train your body and speech, which is fine for dead people. Then you also train your mind, Samadhi, okay? And of course, wisdom. And then you have suttas, to Anathapindika, for example. The Buddha once told Anathapindika and his 500 followers, he says, Anathapindika, you all have been supporting the Sangha, you all have been very kind and generous, but there are moments also when lay people should go for retreat, should meditate. So then you find there are many stories, many teachings in the suttas which tell lay people to meditate. Of course, lay people who can't meditate is a different story, but there are many lay people who can meditate. In fact, we might say today more lay people meditate than monks do. So this is, in other words, definitely clearly a wrong teaching. But what I'm surprised is no one put up a hand and said, sir, what do you mean, and what about the three trainings and so on? I remember there was one case where there was someone brave enough in the crowd from our sutta class he went to this talk, and then there was this Mahayana monk who was trying to say, oh, you know, this Hinayana, they don't teach the Four Noble Truths. Mahayana is great because it teaches the Four Noble Truths. And this young woman couldn't contain herself, you know. She says, put her hand and suddenly says, but sir, you mean to say that Buddha didn't teach the Four Noble Truths? I mean, in the Theravada teachings, the Four Noble Truths so clear. You have the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And there you are, you know, you find somebody in the audience spoke up with courage, Visaraja. You know? So, the courage to speak up is very important in Buddhism. Because if you don't speak up, the teacher will just go on rattling whatever he likes, and some of these things are really not Dhamma-based at all. So in a sense, you might say the teacher has to respect the audience, and the audience should respect the teacher. There should be mutual respect. That means learning is involved. This is very important. Very often we're so worried about status quo, we're worried about being politically correct. We're afraid to say the right things. And it's not surprising if we come to temple just once a week, so we don't want to give a bad impression on ourselves. But if you don't have this habit, then we'll be a socially retarded community. We'll be a socially pathological society. It's going to be very bad. In other words, we don't talk the truth, we don't care about each other, we don't even know the Dharma that we claim to follow. So the willingness and ability to point out that someone is wrong and the other person who is wrong to graciously accept is a very important part of learning. So it goes both ways, in other words, right? This ability to help each other understand the Dharma better. So we have these three levels of learning, philosophical knowledge, or learning through thinking, academic knowledge, learning through listening. And then you have a third one now, that is really our own knowledge, so to speak, our own realization. This is called cultivation-based knowledge, bhavana, maya, panya. The other two are sutta, maya, panya, through listening, cinta, maya, panya, through thinking. Spiritual knowledge, bhavana, maya, panya. Wisdom through mental cultivation. In other words, listening to the Dharma is one thing. Reading suttas is one thing. Listening to sutta teachings, another thing. All these must be brought to life through your practice of mindfulness and meditation. You should at least reflect on them. These are all my understanding, all my own misunderstanding. When you go back, you reflect on these teachings, meditate. To meditate means to let go of all these teachings, all the five senses, be at peace with yourself. It's like cleaning up your lenses. And then you look at it, then you find something maybe which I myself have not seen before. And then you communicate with me and I say, wow, this is good, thank you very much. Right? Occasionally, I do get great ideas from my students and readers and audience. So this last aspect is the most important. Through your meditation, you will realize some levels of understanding. And I can tell you again and again, this is a very important aspect of my life as a translator. Because very often when I read the suttas, I come to some difficult passages. Suddenly I found I'm all alone, I don't know who to ask. There's no one I can ask. Okay, sometimes I ask the scholar monks, they don't know this because they only know scholarly stuff. And I ask another VIP monk, he won't talk to me because I'm not a VIP. And I ask another monk, very old monk, is too old to answer. So I'm left with the suttas. Yeah, I told myself, okay, from what I've learned in the past, just leave it like that for a while. And somehow things will fit together. And as I go on studying other suttas, oh yeah, that's it, I remember, okay, here the Buddha is talking about the five faculties. Right, we know the five faculties, indriyas, pancha indriya, as faith, effort, concentration, mindfulness, wisdom. And we know this as these are general qualities, anyone can have them. And when they are found in Arahat, they are called powers, bala. Okay? Then I found this one sutta where the Buddha says that uses this word indriya, applying them to the 4 kinds of saints up to the Arhat. So this is interesting. How do we deal with this then? Fortunately, sometime in the past, I read somewhere one of those insightful scholars who are also practitioners. This scholar wrote, it says, in early Buddhist teachings, there is less technicality. In other words, there are fewer technical terms. Technical terms when they are fixed, like in Abhidhamma, there's only one meaning. In the early suttas, the Buddha uses the terms without being attached to them. They don't have a technical sense. In other words, you've got to look at the context. Yeah, you see, you have the word at the back, you have text and context. Yeah, the Buddha says spiritual faculties. What does he mean? Well, he is referring to the spiritual faculty of the saints, right? So the saints, whether they are learners or arhats, the same word is used. Only later in Abhidhamma and post-Buddha times, the terms became more technical. Indriya is used for non-arhats and bala used for arhat. So we have to know this evolution of usage of terms. It's not easy, but if you study the suttas, you will know, and the teacher, the translator will tell you. So, in other words, here is where there is such a thing as early Buddhism. You know, one of the things that's terrifying development now is that there's so much learning available today that some young, zealous preachers or teachers, they have taken a stand saying things like, oh, there's no such thing as early Buddhism. You know that there is Mahayana is the oldest Buddhism, and so on and so forth. And they will take all kinds of stand. I think this is a bit worrying because who are you listening to? Are you listening to the scholars or are you reading the suttas directly? I would invite all such people to spend serious time studying the suttas carefully. I don't mean spending just a few minutes studying one sutta and then going back to other late teachings. If you study the early suttas or the Pali suttas carefully, you see there are clear marks of earliness. For one very important reason, the suttas are repetitive. They are meant to be oral tradition. You find there's no such characteristic in the minor suttas. The minor suttas belong to a time when it was a book tradition. And this alone, it was a very good idea of the earliness of the teachings. And we should not look down on early teachings. They are the roots of our Buddhist wisdom. And we look down the roots, then there's a Chinese saying, go, you are spitting into the well that gives you a drink that removes your thirst. So, early Buddhism is a meaningful term, is very important to us, so that we can understand later what the later teachings, or more important that we're able to understand ourselves. So this comes from our own meditation, this learning through cultivation, bhavana mayapanya. Because in the peace of our minds, we begin to see the teachings fit together. We have no agenda, or we begin to realize what is our agenda. Our agenda in teaching the Dharma. Right? We begin to become more humble, and then we actually want to be a better person. And when you stand before a crowd and talk, or you give a Dharma or Sutta study, people can feel that you mean what you say. There is joy in what you say is reliable, worth remembering, and so on. Because you're speaking the Dharma. It's not that you're a good speaker or you're an orator, and so that's not the point. Because if you say an orator, a good speaker, you're talking about is the speaker is more important than teaching. Right? I know there are many good meditators who can't speak well, or no orators at all. The little that they say go a very long way if you listen to them.